Hi, everybody. It's Ron again, and we're here for another look at today's alarming, sometimes tiring, sometimes interesting headlines. So let's get right to it. Here we have further, the always here at the top when there's a big crisis thing, just like when the Ukraine Russia war started a couple years ago. That news is top news for a long time. It brings in the viewers, brings in the clicks. And here we have Israel, Gaza, same sort of thing. Assassination attempt on Palestinian President Abbas. This is, I don't think this whole aspect of it, of who's in charge of the Palestinian territories is quite put out in the press, particularly in the West. You have the two areas that were agreed to, where you have the Palestinian Authority that would be in the West Bank and in Gaza, and they have been ruled over by a sort of moderate government that has been cooperating with Israel in normalizing relationships. However, in 2007, a terrorist group, Hamas, had a coup in the Gaza Strip and has been controlling it since then. And they have apparently a close association with Iran, and thus their attacks on Israel recently, where you don't hear that much about what's happening in the West Bank and with the actual legitimate government, the Palestinian Authority, that is there. So it's probably not surprising that the same forces that want to take over Gaza, or perhaps have other ulterior motives in the region, they're trying to get rid of the remaining part of the legitimate Palestinian Authority government that rules in the West Bank. Despair, destruction. Somebody died in a protest in California. Anti-Semitism all over the place. Very, very strange times. Here we have poor elderly Biden there. I don't take any joy of how old he is. I'm getting these links open, but I think we actually looked at this a little bit yesterday. This is the idea that we seem to have within the sphere of the Democratic Party. We have people who are a little more on the conservative side, a little more on the liberal side. There's rumblings from both sides. There are challengers that seem to be going to rise up in the primaries to challenge the incumbent. We also have RFK Jr., the son of Robert Kennedy, who is gone out as an independent. Is sort of an odd fringe character. He might appeal more to the Republicans, or the very right conspiratorial leaning Republicans, because he's a big anti-vaxxer guy, a lot of unusual opinions. This is what I wanted to you have two kinds of evidence. You have like real evidence, which is, we did a study, it was properly conducted with a number of people, and we have these results. And even with this, we're talking about whether Biden's agenda is popular. We can sometimes criticize studies if they're biased, or you look into the methodology. But on the other hand, there's anecdotal evidence, and people I know in the United States who communicate with me, various ones, over time. Almost everyone is very dissatisfied with things like inflation in the United States. Like many staples that regular working people buy in stores have nearly doubled in price. Very strange situation there. So people are unhappy. However, the media almost always is feeding us this idea that, despite what you might hear about homelessness in big cities, or crime in big cities, or inflation, that's usually, it seems to be not associated with Biden that much, and that people, they love him, and they support him, and it's not as bad as you think. Which I find it's a very strange dissonance with what I hear. And again, this is an anecdotal evidence. You see, you would say my sampling size, the people I might hear from, they're probably maybe more conservative or from a more conservative area. However, I do think I can feel or detect within the media this idea that any time that inflation is raised up or homelessness is raised up, they're definitely trying to go soft on Biden by telling us, the reader, that it's really better than you think it is, the country. So in any case, despite what the media has just been telling you, Biden is going to seems to be facing some challenges, perhaps in the primary, from other people who are run against him. And this is, again, I mentioned this before, but it bears mentioning again. Usually, that's a bad sign for an incumbent that is running for re-election. If you have a primary challenger when you're an incumbent, that doesn't bode well for your election. A classic example being Ted Kennedy running in the primaries against incumbent Jimmy Carter in the run-up to the 1980s election, where Carter eventually lost to Reagan. Here in the United States, every November we have elections. Every 4 years, it's a presidency, and then, that we have different groups of senators, two groups that they have 6-year terms, so they come due for election at certain times, and then every 2 years, every congressperson that is every person in the House of Representatives, not a senator. Senators have 6 years. House of Representatives 2 years. So those people are always running. Every 2 years they got to re-elect, and then the governors are on their own cycles, and they're spread out as well. So tonight we're seeing these the last election this year, and this November there'll be the presidential term next year. So here we have various things that are still developing. We'll see where that comes out. Usually, in general, the party in power, the incumbency in the White House, they're going to lose out. People vote the other way. But still, these sort of elections are seen as a barometer of public opinion. And probably tomorrow, I could start looking into this and start picking it apart, but I just like to let the dust settle, and then we'll look at all the conclusions tomorrow and see what is what this might mean, if anything, for the upcoming primary and the elections next year. Oh, here's a mention here of RFK Jr. Voters are dreading a Trump-Biden rematch. Enter JFK Jr. This is here. He can sap some people from both sides, and when you have a challenger, a third-party challenger who does that in the final elections, it can tip the vote in one way or another in peculiar ways that you might not be able to foresee. It's thought that RFK might disadvantage Trump more than Biden, but we'll see how that works out. More people. Larry Hogan taunts both parties, and rumors of White House bid. This is, we've talked about in the last couple of days, the smoke-filled rooms, the thing that's going to happen in Iowa in the lead up to the Iowa caucus, one of the first primary elections. It's a caucus, but it's an election that clearly there are people behind the scenes in the Republican Party Just like we've seen in the Democrat Party, who are raising the alarm about Biden, people are raising the alarm about Trump. And I certainly, I do have pretty good contacts with people, analysts, people who watch these kind of subjects overseas, and they're baffled by, you have to say, is this the best America has to offer in the for president? Two very elderly, problematic people, a Republican and Democrat. It seems like that the United States should be ready for some fresh blood, so to speak, in its top jobs. We talked about Rogan yesterday, and I shed a tear over my low viewership. More Ivanka Streisand, she was there yesterday. You always see a lot of articles when somebody, a major person, has a major book that's coming out. Suddenly they appear in the news. You had Jada Pinkett Smith with article after article in CNN and on all the wires, and it seems like, oh, she's making all these revelations, but no. Those articles don't even mention usually that she has a book coming out. It's all of this is press release publicist stuff that is repurposed into news articles with no mention of the fact that they're set up to promote a book. Same thing with Britney Spears, and I got fooled too because I didn't know she had a book coming out, and there was few weeks coming up to it. There were all kinds of things about her, and I felt sorry for her. I realized, oh, these are all just articles to promote a book. So, speaking of promoting a book, this is my book, and I don't have any salacious, gossipy things, and I'm not dancing with knives like Britney Spears, but this is a novel. It's a literary work about people living in a metropolis, a modern Asian metropolis of concrete and tradition, and the changes that sweep our lives and our internal thoughts and struggles that we all have, our desires to go to unknown places, the furthest places of the world, to grasp our destiny. So it's on Kindle, it's on Amazon. Read it, and if you do, let me know how you liked it. So that's my little aside on books. This was more here in the middle. We have about, in Iowa, the smoke-filled room thing where they're promoting up DeSantis, who's basically a failed primary challenger already. He kind of fell on his face in some of his early attempts to reach the electorate outside of Florida in the wider United States. But there's clearly behind the scenes Republican big shots are saying we've got to replace Trump. But they don't say that openly because Trump still has a huge, manic supporters for him. What is this? Oh, Venezuela. Yeah, that's a fascinating country. Yeah. And it just shows what happens when you try to socialize your economy or have self-sufficiency by, nationalizing industries. I think in general, countries succeed by focusing on what they can do well and importing the rest. Any kind of self-sufficiency drive, India's had that. They're a capitalist country, but they've been hampered by the way their economy is set up. And eventually when you got those self-sufficiency or we want to promote building everything in the country if we can, when you have those kind of policies, eventually you get to a point where you have some vested interests who get into the government, and then they have a vested interest in that economic system and their families and their groups making money from it, and it's very hard to change. So more craziness in LA. I think we saw this terrible picture here. This is sort of about the rot in the inner cities. Again, very not often laid at the steps of the government. It just It's reported as if it's just a change in the weather, and maybe we need to tax billionaires more. Um, Fed watchdog warns crypto destabilizing financial systems. I think it's quite fascinating, the crypto, in that the governments have left it sort of unregulated for so long. I know they slowly cracked down and getting people to declare their taxes on it and this sort of a thing. But considering how much, if people could set up an untrackable system to get that money out in real terms, how that can assist in wrongdoing and in hacking and in kind of blackmail. It's surprising governments haven't been tougher on it. I remember reading Slashdot way back in the day, and I remember an alarm went off. I remember reading Slashdot back in the day when this was first coming out, and I wish I had started mining Bitcoin then. Talking about that governments are going to go crazy over this and they're going to regulate it because it changes their ability to control the currency, and thus control their economy, like the U.S. has done over the past 20 years with pumping at least $1 trillion a year into the economy to try to prevent the cyclical economic up and down. However, in real life, governments haven't gone crazy over crypto. They've kind of let it ride. So those early predictions in Slashdot, I don't think were correct. But I always assumed that would happen. More about Musk. He's laughing manically there in this picture. I don't care how crazy he is. He's a nerd kind of god for someone he took all his money and he did all the cool things a nerd would want to do. Make a rocket ship and fly to space and, make electric cars, compete with the big boys. And those giant corporations have hounded him ever since. That's a real disruption to a fundamental part of, especially the United States economy, where you got another big automaker coming in. Here we have King Charles. King's speech returns to Britain after 72-year absence. So the king is speaking and not the queen. I don't know. I'm like a lot of Americans. I'm sort of fascinated by Great Britain and its royalty. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they speak the same language and the culture's sort of the same but different, exotic enough. It's not like having to learn or listen to a foreign language. I don't know. I like this. Declares smoking will be banned. Another surprising thing. The government's going to ban smoking altogether? I don't know. King Charles has said some weird things over the years, but the idea of banning smoking, I believe is it only Bhutan that bans smoking completely, or like the import and perhaps the use of tobacco products? When you go into a store in a lot of places in the world and you say, there was a sign above this one that says, we sell harmful and addictive tobacco products here. Obviously, that's a government mandated thing, but it seems like if they are actually harmful and addicting in that way, why would they allow them to be sold? But I don't know. Suppose you could say the same thing about alcohol, but people would go crazy if you tried to ban that. At least you can have a little fun with alcohol. I'm not sure about smoking. Here we have nations with biggest drinkers in the world. Brits are third biggest drinkers. Top of the list is Denmark. Interesting. Romania's next. Who knew? UK. Yeah. That's in my lifetime, I think I've seen, let's say in the last 30 years, I remember watching The Simpsons when it first came out in 1989, and it was their kind of open depiction of a guy going to a bar and the joy of being drunk. I thought that was a sort of a new thing that was creeping into the culture. Like, even though he's a drunk and everything, it's sort of fun and funny that you're a drunk. I know there were other shows like Cheers that were set in a bar, but they never touched on very much the subject of alcohol. You know, the main character, Sam, was an alcoholic, but that was only mentioned just a handful of times. Rarely did they play up alcohol angle. And when they did, it was sort of in a negative way. And in Cheers, certainly they never showed it as having fun, although I suppose those people in the bar were having fun there. I feel like starting in the 90s, especially US culture changed, and we started to drink a lot more and accept it. And then we have social media where everybody is showing this alcohol and how fun they are and how great it is. But I don't know. I think everybody's had some drinking in their life, and eventually you have to say, I don't get enough out of it. It's not really good for you. You know you shouldn't do it. So that's my attitude towards it. Disney insiders losing faith in Iger. I'm sure if you spend any time on YouTube, you will find a lot of stuff talking about the demise of Disney. In the wider press, there hasn't been that much, but in the last few months, it's sort of ramping up where the mainstream press cannot ignore the strange and sudden demise of all of Disney's franchises, and perhaps more than anything, maybe a public perception that they're tired. With Disney, they're tired of the sameness of their product, and tired maybe more of the strange declining product quality of the product after the high point in cinema history of the Marvel's was it Avengers Endgame. And I remember seeing that, and I thought that was spectacular. You know, I mean, that was, even in terms of storytelling. And if you read my book, I had checkerboard. I have several characters with different narratives, and I was just fascinated that I have so many threads of characters in the end game, and everybody gets a little taste of screen time, and it was very compelling. And I agree with people, some of those filmmakers who say it's like an amusement park or a roller coaster, not real filmmaking. But it was entertaining. But since then, a lot of their product has been dreck or average at best, and they're kind of coasting. So this is quite interesting to see where this Disney thing leads to. A sphere. This is so cool. Love to be there and see that. There you go. CFO quits after the venue runs over $1 billion over budget. Some book here about billionaires acting crazy. Who would have thought I think they'd be on an even keel. Who would have thought that having all the money in the world might cause you to do crazy extreme things? Stallone, he's an artist and all kinds of things. He's in his 70s now. I always liked him. Wish he would have gotten even some better roles than he did, but he had some great classic ones in all of cinema. I mean, Rocky, shouldn't overlook that as just some sort of cliched boxing film. It's not. It's brilliant in just about every way. Here we got neo-Nazis turning up everywhere. What a strange thing to be involved in or want to do. I can understand people getting upset, feeling an outcast, maybe having a little racism in your thought, but why would you ever want to be a neo-Nazi or a Klansman? It's very crazy. So anyway, that's a look at the headlines for today. And tomorrow, stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some conclusions from the elections in America, and we can shed some more light on this Biden situation, this Trump situation, where both candidates are being talked about in those smoke-filled rooms where the party bigwigs probably really want to get rid of them. So until tomorrow, I will see you then. Bye-bye.